My name is Moses Harvey. I am a keen amateur naturalist, and I would like to describe to you an extraordinary event with which I am privileged to have become involved. Two local fishermen, Daniel Squires and Theo Pico, were at sea in a nearby cove. With them was Theo's 12-year-old son, Tom, who spotted what he thought was a piece of floating wreckage. What happened as they drew near would have put fear in the heart of any seafaring man. The monstrous creature, for that's what it was, struck the little vessel hard with its beak and threw a tentacle around the bow. But with guile and courage beyond his years, young Tom reached for an axe. The men escaped the clutches of this malevolent sea monster, and the severed tentacle was brought to me. It was 19 feet long. I was in awe. I was now the possessor of one of the rarest curiosities in the whole animal kingdom, the veritable tentacle of the hitherto mythical devilfish, about whose existence naturalists had been disputing for centuries. I knew that I held in my hand the key to the great mystery, and that a new chapter would now be added to natural history.
There is a place so cold and so dark, an inky abyss pricked by constellations of alien light. A world more difficult to explore than space itself. This world is the inner space of our own deep oceans.
And it's home to the last great mystery of the sea, a secret submariner, an enigma, an animal almost never seen alive, and it's my quest to try and pull the little we do know about it together. It's the largest invertebrate predator on Earth. It's called Architeuthis, the giant squid.
The giant squid is probably the last great mystery in the sea.
It's like a new dinosaur. But in fact, we know more about dinosaurs than we do about giant squid.
I can't catch one. It's real simple.
We can stand on a shore and 2 kilometres away in deep water, these animals are living their existence every day, and it may as well be aliens on the moon.
Squid are common. There are more than 650 species. They're quick, colourful, undoubtedly beautiful, and they're all predators. Highly successful animals which have stalked our seas for 500 million years. Now, we actually know quite a lot about most of them, but next to nothing about the big one, the one that got away. 125 years after that severed tentacle was brought to Moses Harvey, we're still ignorant of all but the basics of giant squid biology. We don't know how long they live, how big they get, how fast they swim, or how they meet and mate. The giant squid remains tantalizingly out of reach, still anchored in the centuries-old legends of ancient mariners. The early Norse sailors named this creature with root-like arms, kraken.
I now come to the sea monster called kraken. This creature is the largest and most surprising of all the animal creations. If the fishermen find that the kraken, this creature has a strong and peculiar scent which it can emit at certain times, and by means of which it beguiles and draws the crayfish to come in. He then opens his arms and seizes and swallows his welcome guests.
By the end of the 16th century, images and illustrations of sea monsters were commonplace, and they appeared in all the good natural history books of the age. This one, Iconis alamalium, was printed in 1560, and it contains plenty of species that we're familiar with. This is stylized, but undoubtedly a hammer-headed shark. Just over the page here is a lovely drawing of a dolphin. And then just a bit further back is this charming illustration of a seahorse. But alongside all of these known animals is a fantastical fauna. Look at this. It's a 7-headed snake monster, complete with scales, clawed feet and a curled tail. And then just a bit further back, sea serpents, a giant dragon wrestling with a crustacean, and this bizarre frilled fish. And just a couple of pages back, a whole host of ship-sinking leviathans, and judging by their spouting here, I've no doubt that these creatures were later recognised as the world's great whales. But you know, when this book was printed, there was no reason for people to believe that these creatures couldn't exist. And in fact, this whole volume tells us something about the way that a species moves through our own perception, initially as a mythical or legendary animal, and then through classification as a known zoological species. And if we take these great whales here as a case in part, they can actually tell us quite a bit about why the biology of the giant squid remains such a mystery. It's easy to imagine how those intrepid early seafarers would have been terrified by the sight of animals so much bigger than their ships. These humpbacks are actually one of the smaller whales, but when they breach amid great veils of spray, they're, well, awe-inspiring, seemingly the stuff of legend.
But what happened was that these spectacular animals didn't remain as scary sea monsters for very long, for the very simple reason that they're mammals like us. So they have to emerge from this relatively inaccessible environment, the sea, to the surface in order to breathe air. So we got to see them and we got to know them. And it was probably then that we learned to exploit them for the first time, for their oil, for their blubber and for their bones. And this led to the development of a ferocious industry, which by the end of the 1960s had brought some of these whale species to the brink of extinction.
But now they're back. 3 decades of active conservation has reversed the fortunes of our whales. For some, they've been endowed with an almost spiritual status. For others, they're a living barometer of our planet's health. Across the seas, expectant eyes scour the horizons for those telltale puffs of spray. And close encounters like this are quite unforgettable. The whale has completed a journey from blood-curdling beast to cherished icon. But what of the mysterious kraken? Since Moses Harvey first described the tentacle back in the 1870s, there have been over 100 reports of dead or moribund giant squid. But these have been only fragments or badly decomposed specimens, and the giant squid has never revealed itself in the same way as the whales, for the simple reason that we haven't been able to observe it living in its own deep ocean environment. But that doesn't mean that it's never been seen alive. Perhaps the most striking encounter yet documented was made earlier this century by J.D. Starkey from a trawler in the Indian Ocean.
As I gazed, fascinated, a circle of green light glowed before me. This green, unblinking orb I soon realized was an eye. Suddenly I knew that I was gazing at almost point-blank range at a colossal squid. I'm not squeamish, but this cold, malevolent, unblinking eyes seemed to be looking directly at me. I've never seen anything so coldly hypnotic and intelligent before or since. I moved towards the bow. There in a pool of lightwords tentacles. They were 2 foot thick. The suckers were clearly visible. My heart was going like a sledgehammer. Alone on deck, I was not so much afraid as excited, as if this was an opportunity to see something rarely seen by man. I walked aft. Gradually, the truth dawned. I had walked the length of the trawler, more than 60 feet. The giant lay gazing up at me, Then after 15 minutes, it seemed to swell as its valve opened, and without any visible effort, zoomed into the night.
Now it strikes me that this very real animal is still bound up in myth and romance, but to stand any chance of getting closer to it, we need some good, hard science. In Baja, Mexico, I met Dr. Clyde Roper to glean a few facts about this most elusive creature. I asked him how squid work, what we can learn from squid anatomy about squid lifestyle. These are Dosidicus, Humboldt squid, caught for the pot by local fishermen.
Well, these animals move by jet propulsion. They're the originators of jet propulsion. When the animal uses its funnel, the water is squirted right out through in a big jet fashion. It comes right out through the tube. The mantle contracts and shoots water out in this direction, for example. And in that case, the animal jets backwards. Then it is very maneuverable and can bend its funnel back along its belly. And when it squirts water out in this way, the animal will jet forward, for example, when it wants to capture its prey.
Now, to many people looking at this animal here, it's going to look no more than a pile of jelly, but those arms and those tentacles are, in its native environment, quite dexterous, aren't they?
All squids have tentacles, and at the ends of these long, muscular, almost like bungee cords, are a whole collection or cluster of suckers. The feeding tentacles, as we call them, are used for capturing the prey, and they shoot out together. They usually are even held together, locked together. They shoot out, capture the prey, pull the prey into the arm crown, then the arms take over and move the prey or the food towards the mouth. And squids and octopuses have a wonderful mechanism. Their mouth, in fact, is a beak, almost like a bird's beak. This entire ball is a mass of muscle, and if I move them back and forth here in that kind of a motion, that'll give you a bit of an idea of how they work. These animals will bite chunks of prey. They do not swallow the prey whole. They bite chunks out and then swallow it, ramming the chunks of food down their throat with a tongue with a lot of teeth on it.
Clyde is here in the Sea of Cortez with fellow squid expert Dr. Ron O'Dore. As we can't expect to observe giant squid in the wild, our theories about their behaviour have to be compiled by studying much smaller ones. So this evening, they're after Dosidicus. But first, we've got to catch one. The fishermen are not optimistic. This year's El Niño weather has played havoc with their fishery. But eventually, in the early hours, we strike it lucky. What's happening now, Ron?
The squid is in a magnesium chloride solution, and he'll fall asleep.
Ron's specialism is locomotion, how powerfully and how quickly squid can move. He's devised an ingenious radio tagging system which enables him to retrieve data from animals swimming underwater.
We're
Flushing
just
water
flushing
in.
water through.
Trying to get the anesthesia flushed out of him.
I don't know, maybe what we need is a lot of water.
Maybe. This is like artificial respiration, so that the animal will recover.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, I'll handle the squid and...
All right, he's ready.
Yeah, he's ready to go in?
Yep. All right. Good.
So, Ron, what does this visual data actually transform into in terms of that squid's movement at the moment?
Well, one of the interesting things about jet propulsion is when you simply breathe, you are actually pushing yourself forward.
So squid breathe and move at the same time?
Yeah,
basically.
so the two systems are tied together.
If that's respiration, then what about locomotion?
The animals have one primary means of locomotion, which is the big escape jet. There, you saw that. He's just gotten excited and put out a big jet there.
How fast would it have been moving when it was using jet propulsion, though?
For an animal this size, 2 or 3 meters a second.
Now that's for this particular species. What about an educated guess as to how fast a giant squid might be able to move using the same method?
But these are a very powerful squid, and I would guess that although the giant squid are much bigger, they have less muscle in their mantle, and they probably don't travel any faster than that. In fact, they might even be slower.
Slower than 3 meters per second?
Yeah, but that's just a guess. We did a calculation once that if they were as muscular as other smaller squid, they could do around the world in 80 days.
So I'd seen squid in the wild, and they're amazing animals, fast and highly maneuverable. But these Dosidicus are hunting at night, and giant squid live in the darkness of the deep ocean. So the next question has to be, how do they find their prey? In California, I met Dr. Eric Hochberg to talk eyes. The museum's life-size model confirms that the eye of the giant squid is the size of a dinner plate, which to me suggests that it's all the better to see with.
The giant squid have the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. The larger the eyes, the more light they can bring in and capture in their surrounding environment. Their eye is very similar to a human eye in that they have a lens to the eye which allows them to see things at distance, to resolve images or shadows in the water surrounding them in this mid-depth range.
Why don't we encounter more giant squids?
Probably because of the acuity in their vision. They are monitoring everything that's going on around them, and so they're able to avoid a net. They can sense it or see it and swim away before the net would actually capture them.
But in fact, they don't always get away. This is marine biology's most tantalizing tentacle, torn from a living giant squid at 600 meters, snatched from its domain and brought into ours. The man who caught it is Dr. Bruce Roberson of Monterey Bay Aquarium's Research Institute.
Zero. Roger that on the zero.
We had a deep midwater trawl working at 600 meters depth. What happened was, as the mouth of the net closed, it chopped off the feeding tentacle of an Architeuthis and brought it back to the surface. That turns out to have been the first depth record that we'd ever been able to come up with.
Outboard's clear. And open the D-samplers, all right. Belly packs engaged and bypasses engaged.
Bruce is in charge of a dynamic program of research using ROVs, remote operated vehicles, to study the ecosystem of the deep ocean. These robots are at the cutting edge of technology, and using them, we can explore the abyssal lair of the giant squid. And if we can see where it lives, then maybe I can better understand how it lives.
Begin transect, 400 meters.
Bruce, in human terms, this deep-sea environment is just about as alien as we can get, isn't it? What's it really like down here?
Well, for you and me, creatures that live up in the sunshine, it's a pretty inhospitable place. The temperature drops off rapidly. The light is extinguished very rapidly. The pressure increases as you go deeper. The oxygen content diminishes as you go deeper. All in all, it's a very uncomfortable and difficult place for sunshine-loving animals to live.
So what sort of animals have we got living down here?
There's a whole range of different types, fishes and squids and crustaceans and the like, but I think the biggest surprise has been how many jellies there are at this depth. Different kinds of jellies, most of them predators. This is a lobate ctenophore, a comb jelly. The colored lights that we're seeing are caused by the comb rows on the body that propel it. When white light hits them, it breaks the white light up into its spectral colors, and we see blues or greens or reds. They're very fragile animals, but they're predators and pretty effective.
Would you say this is possibly the last great environment for us to explore? The place where we're going to find something pretty exciting?
It certainly is. When you consider that we have explored less than 1% of the vast volume of deep water, it seems almost inevitable that there's a great many things we haven't yet found, haven't yet seen.
What sort of animal we got here?
This is Galatutus. It's one of the squids that we've been working on. He's in a typical J posture with the feeding tentacles in a prayer-like attitude.
What's the purpose of that?
I wish I knew. It may be one that allows them to stay stationary in the water column and then to thrust those feeding tentacles forward if an opportunity to feed presents itself.
Is this the place that we should look to see the giant squid?
We're certainly well within the depth range of Architeuthis. The little bit that we know about them tells us that they inhabit this depth range and probably feed on the kinds of fishes and smaller squids that we're seeing with great regularity. So yep, this is the habitat we expect to find them in. This is the place they probably call home.
Do you think you'll ever see one on this screen?
Yes, I do.
But not yet. Not today, and not for me. This animal is still beyond our grasp. We have an idea how it moves, an idea how it sees and hides, and now I've even peered into its sanctuary. But these are just fragments of a perplexing jigsaw. And just when I thought there were no more pieces in the box, the best piece of all was trawled up in Australia. A fresh and complete specimen, now in the hands of Dr. Mark Norman at Melbourne University. This is what we've been waiting for.
We recently had a rush of giant squids, so in 1 year we ended up with 3 coming in, and all of them were caught in deep sea fishing nets off Tasmania in around 800 metres of water. Where we were lucky was that these animals were actually captured live, so they'd come up in the nets really fresh. They were put into coolers and ice chests and brought back to Melbourne for study.
This is fantastic. It's on TV, but it's extraordinary, alien. It's no wonder that these monstrous creatures inspired 1,000 legends. But I was going to get even closer.
All octopus and squid have got 8 arms around their mouth. The difference that squid have from octopuses is they have 2 really long shooting tentacles, and this is a tentacle from a giant squid. This one came from an animal that was about 10 metres long, but the biggest ones that's known is 18 metres, of which the tentacle was like 14 metres of it.
14 metres?
And so 2/3 of the length of these giant squids are these giant tentacles that they shoot out to grab their food with.
Yeah, I mean, grabbing the food is immediately apparent with these serrated teeth on each of the suckers here, isn't it?
The suckers have these little rings with sharp teeth all the way around that really help grip onto the prey when they shoot out to grab fish or squid.
Now, this is a soft-bodied animal, so how does it propel these tentacles through the water?
They have circular muscle in these tentacle shafts, and basically it's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. You squeeze it hard and it shoots it out fast. So with the sort of liquid core, the squeezing that muscle makes the arm extend, and so it shoots out. Now, once it's started shooting out, it uses this ridge along the back of the tentacle club, which is called the swimming keel, and that helps sort of sail it or plane it through the water. But the main way they kind of keep stability is by locking the 2 arms together. So this is the opposite tentacle from the other side in the same animal, and they have like press studs on the inside of these tentacles that lock in against each other and right down the shafts. This is unique to giant squids, and they use that as a way of shooting out like this giant claw, with only this last sort of metre being the snapping sort of feeding part of the animal.
From looking at the body structure of this animal, what can you learn about its hunting strategies?
It gives the impression that it's something like an ambush sort of hunter. It lurks in the background of schools of fish or schools of squid, or sits in dark water waiting for a burst of light as some poor animal's been attacked by a bigger animal, and having seen that light with its huge eye and its really well developed sort of eye lens, it would then shoot out this giant snapping claw to grab onto the other predator.
But there was still one more secret the autopsy revealed, a startling clue about their sex life.
This is the arm from an adolescent female that came in with all of her skin on, and it was in this skin that we made an amazing discovery, the remains of sperm packages that the male appears to have injected into the skin of that female's arms.
This really is weird sex. Why aren't they introducing the sperm into the female sexual organ?
I think this sperm storage shows us that these animals have a solitary existence, and it's a rare encounter that they come across a member of the opposite sex. If you do, then you make the most of it by grabbing some sperm then and saving it until you need it when your eggs are ready to be used. And then she pulls this sperm out to fertilise her eggs.
Next question is, how is she going to do that?
I think this sort of raises more questions than answers. We don't know if she uses her beak to peel back the skin, or whether she uses the suckers to peel the skin open, or whether the sperm will migrate to the surface when it's time for the eggs to be fertilised. But there's still many unanswered questions.
The giant squid isn't an X-creature. It's one of zoology's last great teases. It's so close. A highly evolved specialist, a predator big enough to tear us limb from limb. It snatches its prey in the darkness, stealthily moves to its next meal or to a chance meeting with a mate, and yet we hardly know it. The giant squid remains an enigma. It exists outside modern science. Somewhere out there in the dark depths of our oceans lives an animal we simply don't know. We've trawled for it, we've dissected the occasional one. A few lucky people have even seen it, and yet it still lurks beyond our knowledge, and that's so exciting. But then one day, maybe one day soon, we'll sink into the alien realm of this mysterious kraken and solve its secrets. Someone will come face to face with the real giant squid.
To sea. We've accumulated more observation time underwater than anyone else in the world, and one of these days we'll run across one of those guys.
I think one day we may be lucky enough to see one of these things live in their natural environment, and that would be absolutely fantastic.
There are several colleagues of mine that are actively pursuing these animals in the wild, and if we're lucky, we may be able to come back with images in the next couple of years. At least that's the hope.
Coming up next on BBC One, from the depths of time, inventions brought to fruition in the TW Time Machine.